Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and let's get going with Silmarillion Saturday. Now, these Saturdays are our chance to revisit the history and legends of the Elder Days, whether we look at them from the Silmarillion, unfinished tales, or more. And today, we continue the Akallabêth in the Silmarillion, where things turn dark under the reign of Tar-Atanamir. These things took place in the days of Tar-Kiryatan, the shipbuilder, and of Tar-Atanamir, his son, and they were proud men, eager for wealth. And they laid the men of Middle-earth under tribute, taking now rather than giving. It was to Tar-Atanamir that the messengers came, and he was the 13th king. And in his day the realm of Númenor had endured for more than 2,000 years, and was come to the zenith of its bliss, if not yet of its power. But Atanamir was ill-pleased with the counsel of the messengers, and gave little heed to it, and the greater part of his people followed him, for they wished still to escape death in their own day, not waiting upon hope. And Atanamir lived to a great age, clinging to his life beyond the end of all joy, and he was the first of the Númenorians to do this, refusing to depart until he was witless and unmanned, and denying to his son the kingship at the height of his days. For the lords of Númenor had been wont to wed late in their long lives, and to depart and leave the mastery to their sons when these were come to full stature of body and mind. Then Tar-Ankaliman, son of Atanamir, became king, and he was of like mind. And in his day the people of Númenor became divided. On the one hand was the greater party, and they were called the king's men, and they grew proud and were estranged from the Eldar and the Valar. And on the other hand was the lesser party, and they were called the Elendili, the elf friends, for though they remained loyal indeed to the king and the house of Elros, they wished to keep the friendship of the Eldar, and they hearkened to the counsel of the lords of the West. Nonetheless, even they, who named themselves the Faithful, did not wholly escape from the affliction of their people, and they were troubled by the thought of death. Thus the bliss of Westernesse became diminished, but still its might and splendor increased, for the kings and their people had not yet abandoned wisdom, and if they loved the Valar no longer, at least they still feared them. They did not dare openly to break the ban, or to sail beyond the limits that had been appointed. Eastward still they steered their tall ships, but the fear of death grew ever darker upon them, and they delayed it by all means that they could. And they began to build great houses for their dead, while their wise men labored unceasingly to discover, if they might, the secret of recalling life, or at the least of the prolonging of men's days. Yet they achieved only the art of preserving incorrupt the dead flesh of men, and they filled all the land with silent tombs in which the thought of death was enshrined in the darkness. But those that lived turned the more eagerly to pleasure and revelry, desiring ever more goods and more riches, and after the days of Tar-Ankaliman, the offering of the first fruits to Eru was neglected, and men went seldom any more to the hollow upon the heights of Meneltarma in the midst of the land. Thus it came to pass at that time that the Númenorians first made great settlements upon the west shores of the ancient lands, for their own land seemed to them shrunken, and they had no rest or content therein, and they desired now wealth and dominion in Middle-earth, since the west was denied. Great harbors and strong towers they made, and there many of them took up their abode. But they appeared now rather as lords and masters and gatherers of tribute than as helpers and teachers. And the great ships of the Númenorians were borne east on the winds and returned ever laden, and the power and majesty of their kings were increased, and they drank and they feasted, and they clad themselves in silver and gold. In all this the elf friends had small part. They alone came now ever to the north in the land of Gil-galad, keeping their friendship with the elves and lending them aid against Sauron. And their haven was Pelargir, above the mouths of Anduin the Great. But the king's men sailed far away to the south, and the lordships and strongholds that they made have left many rumors in the legends of men. In this age, as is elsewhere told, Sauron arose again in Middle-earth and grew, and turned back to the evil in which he was nurtured by Morgoth, becoming mighty in his service. Already in the days of Tar-Minastir, the 11th king of Númenor, he had fortified the land of Mordor, and had built there the Tower of Barad-dûr, and thereafter he strove ever for the dominion of Middle-earth, to become a king over all kings, and as a god unto men. And Sauron hated the Númenóreans because of the deeds of their fathers and their ancient alliance with the elves and allegiance to the Valar. Nor did he forget the aid that Tar-Minastir had rendered to Gil-galad of old in that time when the One Ring was forged and there was war between Sauron and the elves in Eriador. Now he learned that the kings of Númenor had increased in power and splendor, and he hated them the more, and he feared them, lest they should invade his lands and wrest from him the dominion of the east. But for a long time he did not dare to challenge the lords of the sea, and he withdrew from the coasts. Yet Sauron was ever guileful, and it is said that among those whom he ensnared with the 9 rings, 3 were great lords of Númenorian race. And when the Ulairi arose that were the ringwraiths, his servants, and the strength of his terror and mastery over men had grown exceedingly great, he began to assail the strong places of the Númenóreans upon the shores of the sea. Now, at first in this reading, we start with Tir-Ciriatan and his son Tar-Atanamir. In Unfinished Tales, the line of Elros, the kings of Númenor, we learn that Tar-Ciriatan was a mighty king, but greedy of wealth, and his servants oppressed the men of Middle-earth. It is said that he constrained his father to yield to him heir of his free will he would. In this way, it is held, might the first coming of the shadow upon the bliss of Númenor be seen. His son, Tar-Atanamir, makes it worse, rejecting the counsel of the elven messengers and clinging to his life beyond the end of all joy, becoming known as the Unwilling. It doesn't get any better as the bliss of Westernesse became diminished. Yet the might kept increasing, and that's the thing. Númenor appears strong and healthy from the outside, but it is dying from the inside out. Their wise men spend their time not pondering the wisdom of the Eldar, but trying to cheat death, and all they can figure out is how to mummify the dead. No longer do they show up to help the men in Middle-earth. They come to take tribute and to oppress. This is the height of Númenorian colonialism here. All while the few faithful that there are do what they can to keep friendship with Gil-galad and the elves. But guess what? Sauron's back in town, and he hates Númenor. What's more is that of the 9 rings, he managed to ensnare 3 great lords of Númenorian race. Man, I sure wish we knew more about that, but we'll have to leave those 3 to our speculation. For now, though, that does it for this week's Silmarillion Saturday, and for week 61 of the TTT. We're halfway through Series 8. Thank you for joining me, and please come back next week as the kings abandon the elven tongues and start persecuting the faithful. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can get an ad-free feed, bonus episodes, and be a part of my content council to help decide what I'll talk about next series. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @TolkienTimes on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.